Being a quick ejaculator is not a permanent situation. It's a learned pattern. And what may feel like something genetic or unchangeable is really just a deeply ingrained habit that you can overcome. And so ejaculation control for a man is a skill. It's a skill that you must develop. And it truly is a form of athleticism. Sexual Kung Fu training for sexual mastery, is comparable to athletic training. Not that you have to do anything like ridiculously physically challenging or demanding, but you do have to change how you respond to situations. I think a good analogy here is like, think of a kid, a young teenager who he's weak, he's easily intimidated, he lacks confidence, scrawny little guy, kind of like me when I was a teenager. A bully comes at him, physically confronts him, and his tendencies to shut down and cower and basically not stand up for himself, right? And one day, this kid's fed up with it, so he joins an MMA gym. And he learns to train himself because he's tired of feeling physically intimidated by others. He's tired of his response being to cower and to, protect himself rather than like stand up and fight for himself. After years of training in an MMA gym, he develops significant confidence in himself, in his physical body, in his abilities. And anytime he's confronted by a bully, he no longer stands up for it. And so this is exactly what can happen to a man with ejaculation control. And the difference here being, instead of a physical confrontation, it's a physical confrontation, but in a different way, where you go into sex feeling intimidated and worried, and you ejaculate quickly, so you kind of get your ass kicked in just a few seconds, and then training to become a master in the bedroom. That's the analogy here. Let's get into what that entails and how you can train yourself like an athlete to develop absolute ejaculation control. I'm Jonathan White. I've helped thousands of men from around the world learn to retrain their mind, body, and nervous system to last as long as they want during sex, experience non-ejaculatory orgasms, and go into sex feeling confident and enjoying themselves. Make sure you grab my free ejaculation control ebook through the link in the video description. It's going to teach you techniques to achieve legendary ejaculation control. Make sure you hit subscribe to stay notified when new videos like this are available. So it's funny, I feel like I've been getting more comments recently from you guys saying something like this, like, Jonathan, you talked about this ejaculation control, but are you really able to last a long time? Like, how long can you really last? Like, come on, be real. And I understand, I totally understand. Like, for some men, what I'm talking about seems unattainable, seems completely unattainable. It's like, I get it. If you're stuck in quick ejaculation mode right now, it's all you know. It seems like, how could anything else be possible? But I want to be real with you guys, okay? The truth is, I've come a long way in my own practice, my own sexual Kung Fu practice. And I have gotten to a point to where 99% of the time, when I have sex, I last as long as I want. Like, there's no end to it, essentially. It's not even like, oh, it's 15 minutes, it's 20 minutes, it's 30 minutes. It's as long as I want. Because here's the thing, when it comes to ejaculation control, you're either in two modes. You're either in countdown towards ejaculation, whether that's 5 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. That's still like, countdown towards ejaculation. You're either in that mode or you're in what I would call infinite control mode, where there's no buildup at all. There's no buildup. It's this oceanic state of just incredible, kind of primal, raw sexual experience. And you can sustain it as long as you want. But of course, you may fluctuate from this state to that state back and forth throughout a session. One really easily understandable model is of the nervous system. You're always functioning more dominantly in one aspect of your nervous system, either the parasympathetic or the sympathetic. The parasympathetic is the calm, rest and digest state, rest and procreate state, all right? Whereas the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight response, where adrenaline, cortisol is being released, and you're nervous, you're overexcited, you're overstimulated, your mind's racing. Ejaculation is a function of the sympathetic nervous system. Ejaculation happens because that state of your nervous system shifts online to push semen out, okay? And if you never shift over into that fight or flight mode during sex, you won't ejaculate, period. And so what I taught myself to do, and it's not like it was a quick process, it took me years and years and years and years, I'm gonna go into that here in a moment, but what I taught myself to do was to function primarily in this parasympathetic nervous system, in the rest or digest state. Okay? And the equivalent here, talking about like martial arts is like, if someone comes at you and throws a punch at you, do you flinch and like, oh my God, cower? Or have you trained so much that you're able to just like, you recognize what's happening without becoming overly tense and, oh shit, you just like, you neutralize and counterattack whatever you have to do. And I'm not saying that I would be great at doing this myself. I'm not a high level martial artist, I do it for fun. Anyways, but that's the analogy here. What it really is you've retrained your reflexes, how you respond at a subconscious level to a situation. And that is a product of habit. And I have to tell you guys, again, this took me years and years to develop, okay? Really, my path with sexual kung fu began in like 2012, 2013, when I really got serious about it. At the time, I was working with Montauk Chia's books. You know, it was like Multi-Orgasmic Man book, which, you know, had some good stuff. Eventually, I found that a lot of techniques are just not good and completely wrong, but it gave me something to work with. And as my training improved, I started studying with teachers and learning more of these Taoist and tantric methods for ejaculation control and experiencing full body orgasm states. Like I remember the first time I had sex after studying sexual kung fu, after training for, you know, several months on my own, using self-pleasure, the first time I had sex, it was amazing. I had complete control. I remember I was like breathing from my balls up the back of my body, you know, breathing through the microcosmic orbit. I felt this pleasure moving through me. At no point did I feel out of control. I was in that infinite capacity. And I don't remember how long it lasted, how long we went at it for. Probably like 30, 45 minutes, somewhere in there. You know, not super, super long, but you know, not exactly short either. And at the end, I didn't ejaculate and was like, oh, I feel on top of the world. I was like, I did it, I've got it. Well, the next morning, you know, slept in bed with this woman, woke up in the morning, started having sex again. And I was no longer in complete control. It was like instantaneous build up towards ejaculation. I was like, what the hell is happening? Now I managed to not ejaculate during that session, but it was a very different state from like infinite control. Instead of that, it was like, I'm right at the edge and the slightest wrong move could push me over the edge. And that's not really control. And over the next several months, I remember that my sexual sessions were very, very up and down. There was some more sessions, a lot more sessions where I was completely in control. Went as long as I want, never an issue. But there was also a lot of other sessions where I was completely out of control, sometimes where I ejaculated in like a few minutes. This is a pattern that continued over years. Now, what did happen though, was I was in that state of complete control, parasympathetic dominance. I was in that state more and more often. It became more and more frequent. And those times where, like, no matter what I did, it was always right at the edge. The countdown towards ejaculation, again, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, it's still like inevitably it's gonna happen at some point. That's not complete ejaculation control. That started happening less and less frequently. It was about, I would say 5 or 6 years into my sexual kung fu journey where I hit a point where I really felt like I solidly had ejaculation control, where I pretty much knew if I went into sex, ejaculation control wasn't gonna be an issue. Within a year or two, I felt confident that going into sex, I probably wasn't going to ejaculate. But there was still a lot of sessions in there where it was like, I have to really like, you know, keep my hands on the wheel because the slightest thing's gonna push me over to ejaculation. And a lot of people are teaching ejaculation control things, but they're still working with that model of, they're still stuck in the countdown. It's like, okay, well, how do I add another minute or two on the clock? You know, think about baseball, stop and pinch, do Kegels, like all this stuff. It's just distraction techniques. You're still in that fight or flight mode. You're still in the build up to ejaculation. So once I experienced what it was like to have that infinite control, I was like, how do I always go into this, okay? After about 5 years, I felt really solid in how to maintain that. And this is something that I continued to become extremely apparent to me in the past few years. It wasn't about necessarily what was happening during sex. Like, yeah, there's a lot, you know, going into sex, there's sexual kung fu techniques, how to breathe, how to move my sexual energy. But what I realized was that that was about 20% of the equation, maybe a bit more. The most important work that I was doing for my ejaculation control was what I was doing the rest of the day, what I was doing outside of the bedroom. In some ways, to an outside observer, had nothing to do with sex, but this was what was priming me to develop complete ejaculation control, to where I was in this infinite oceanic state of sexual control, sexual experience without ever having to ejaculate. And so the parallel here, coming back to this thing of like, you have to train like an athlete. It really is like being an athlete. And there was up and downs. The reason why I have really good ejaculation control these days is because I train very consistently. I train every single day. I'm doing all the things that you must do to create and maintain ejaculation control. We have to work on a lot of different levels, you know, like shifting from quick ejaculation response, which is attention response, right, to parasympathetic. The number one thing is tension. Retraining your pelvic floor not to tense up. This was the biggest game changer for me. I'll never forget in 2019. I see a lot more people talking about this now, but when I was discovering this myself, just from experimentation in 2018, 2019, there was only one person, this old school Chinese guy, Dr. Lin, who's talking about Kegels not being beneficial basically. He was difficult to understand, but it planted the seed. And so once I experimented with keeping my pelvic floor relaxed during sex, which is the opposite of what my teachers told me to do, like squeeze and draw the energy up, wasn't actually working that great. Once I retrained my pelvic floor to stay relaxed, that was the biggest game changer during sex. But what I also ended up realizing was that it goes beyond just like a physical thing, like, okay, relax my pelvic floor, or do a reverse Kegel. That's one aspect. But if on a particular day, I'm in a high stress state, if my mind is extremely busy, if I'm really worried about things, overthinking, maybe I've been sitting too much, it's really, really difficult to control my pelvic floor. So this goes beyond just like, am I doing an exercise or not doing an exercise? It's how am I managing my mind, which is really how am I managing my nervous system? Am I pumping adrenaline and cortisol 24/7 because I'm engaging my mind in stupid ways, thinking about things that I shouldn't be thinking about, spending too much time staring at a screen, having poor boundaries with my work, when I'm working, when I'm not working, having downtime, spending time in nature, etc. I started to realize, wow, all this is equally important to like just doing some technique. Another physical thing, how am I breathing? This is, again, the foundation of sexual kung fu is the breath, like proper breathing with the belly during sex. One of the things I found had the biggest impact on my ejaculation control, besides the physical training, keeping the pelvic floor relaxed, pelvic floor work, good breathing, is energy circulation. Microcosmic orbit, qigong practice, doing those things daily. Because as my training has evolved over the past 12 years, 13 years, whatever, there's been periods where I've emphasized a lot of energy circulation practices, and I've also gone through periods where I've focused simply on qi building practices, where I'm just sitting, settling my mind in the Dantian, specific Neigong engagements just to build qi. And there's been some weeks where I wasn't focusing so much on circulating energy. And I noticed that sometimes during those periods, it became more difficult for me to circulate my sexual energy during sex. Like basically I had to work harder to get it going. Whereas when I had a daily practice, like for example, going out to the park, doing my Zhan Zhuang, my Qigong standing practice, and sometimes as part of that, I'll just do some Qi circulations. When I have a daily practice of circulating my Qi, when I go into sex, it's like the pathway's already open. It's effortless, like, okay, sexual energy move from my balls, and boom, it does. Complete ejaculation control, not a problem. So it really is like an athlete having to train to stay at their best performance. They're consistently training, drilling the right things. They're also probably taking care of themselves, because if you go into a sports event, you go into a game, a tournament, whatever, and like you're not confident, you're worried, you're stressed out, like you're probably not going to be performing as well. Even if you have, solid like physical drills, if your mind's not there, you're going to struggle. Same thing with sex. If you go into it in a really negative mental state, you're probably going to struggle. So it's all of these aspects of like you're training these things consistently, keeping yourself at your best. So the whole thing here is that if you want elite level ejaculation control, you have to think of yourself as an athlete. You are an athlete. Like sex it's a physical performance. There's physical things happening. And if you're not healthy, if you're not eating well, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not exercising well, there's a lot that can go wrong. Number one, you can't get an erection, a very common issue these days. Your diet, your stress levels, you're taking drugs and medications that are completely wrecking your chemistry. There's a lot of factors to it, all right? And then there's the actual like sexual kung fu practices. It's a huge part of it. It's not everything, but it's the biggest component of it. So I have a whole system that I'm practicing and I'm teaching that hits all the bases that need to be hit to train into sexual mastery and then to maintain it. And here's the caveat though. Maybe it's kind of unfortunate news to some of you, but it's the inevitable truth. It's like to maintain the gains, you must maintain your training. You must maintain your intensity of training to keep the sexual gains. I see this a lot in students who go through my, they go through my courses, they train, they're getting amazing results, they're crushing it, but then they get busy, they drop off the training, and I'll get messages from them saying like, hey, like, this happened and I dropped off, and then once I dropped off, I lost my ejaculation control, I lost my full body orgasm ability, and blah, 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 but here I am starting over again. And again, it's the same thing with like, people go to the gym, right? It's like, it's good to take some rest, like you gotta have your rest days as much as your training periods, but if you drop off, you don't keep your gains. You lose your gains over time. Same thing with being an athlete. Like if you're an MMA fighter, well, if you stop training, you stop drilling, you're not going to perform as well as the guy who's still drilling, who's still training every day. You know what I mean? So the consistency is important. And this is the engine that's keeping your body primed as a sexual pump. Where instead of the pressure of sexual energy making you ejaculate, it simply becomes fuel for your entire body because you've opened up these channels, your sexual energy is integrated to your whole self. That's what it is to be a sexual kung fu master. And it's been interesting as, again, my norm for the past 7 years has been complete ejaculation control. Like going into sex, not even considering like, is this gonna be an issue? Because it's not. But every now and then, there's been a few periods where, for whatever reason, ejaculation control is an issue in one particular session. or maybe it's a couple sessions. And again, it's an opportunity for me to look at, okay, like what's going on here? Why is this happening? And usually it's some aspect of training I've been neglecting. Maybe I've been off my pelvic floor work and it's been a stressful week and I'm holding a lot of tension to my pelvic floor without properly releasing it. That's been the most common thing. Another good example, I mean, just recently, last month, December, I was traveling for the holidays, visiting family, and I got the flu. I got a gnarly flu, like the sickest I've been in like 6 years. High fever, gnarly body aches. You know, I'm sleeping in a separate bed from my wife because I'm super sick, but she comes in the morning like, hey baby, like let's get it on. I'm like, well, I'm sick as fuck, but if you can help me get it up, like, you know, we're gonna go for it. Within a few minutes, I was like, oh shit, like it's very difficult to control ejaculation. I ended up ejaculating, which was not good for my immune system. I think I was so just like kind of feverish and like out of it that was not quite in my right frame of mind. But even for like the next week when I would have sex, ejaculation control was difficult. And another thing I'd realized was that because I'd been traveling, you know, I was very busy. I was still practicing every day, but I was kind of doing some core essential practices. And one thing I had neglected was energetic circulation practices, which is huge for ejaculation control. And so I brought those back into my routine, really made sure I focused on strongly. One of my greatest things for that is the dragon breathing technique, which is a full body macrocosmic orbit, pumping sexual energy through your whole system. Incredible technique that I teach in Multi-Orgasmic Man. It's very comprehensive, you know, it takes 5 weeks to really learn it. Started incorporating a lot of that and boom, next time I went into sex, it's just like in that infinite control space. So yeah, all this is to say that you must understand that sexual mastery, it's being an athlete essentially. So you've got to eat right, you've got to train right, you've got to train consistently. Now you don't have to train as intensely as I do. I practice 3 hours a day on average, you know, often more. You don't have to do that much. You know, my system is based on training 30 minutes, 5 days a week. You're gonna get amazing results with that, but you have to train consistently. That's how you make sexual gains. It's how you develop complete ejaculation control and how you maintain it. And not to mention like improved sexual health, better erections, more energy, more confidence, daily life. So much happens and anyone can do it. You just have to, you know, you have to really want it and you have to work for it. It's what it is. You really can't take a pill. You can't biohack your way or use affirmations. You know, there's no shortcuts here. Like there's no substitute for like good old hard work and consistent training. That's why this is Kung Fu. Skill, discipline, mastery achieved over a period of intensive training. No substitutions, all right? So now what I want you to do is watch a video that will teach you how to breathe in a certain way that will develop powerful ejaculation control. So check that video out, put a link in there. And I know some of you might be concerned, like, how could I possibly find the time to do this? Here's the thing, anyone can carve out an extra 30 minutes a day. I don't care who you are, anyone can find that amount of time, all right? And if you'd like me to make a video detailing how you can fit this into even a busy lifestyle, let me know in the comments below. If you're really interested in this concept of training like an athlete to achieve complete sexual mastery, meaning you're able to have absolute ejaculation control and experience non-ejaculatory orgasms, this is what my Multi-Orgasmic Man course is all about. It's a 12-week program to help all men achieve sexual mastery. It's a complete sexual Kung Fu system. So keep an eye out for when that is open for registration. And your starting point is my free ejaculation control ebook. Get started with techniques right away. There's a link to the video description. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Share it with someone who needs to up their ejaculation control. And if you'd like me to make a video on a full overview of the sexual Kung Fu system, like specifically everything that's involved in this journey of sexual mastery, let me know in the comments below. And best wishes to you on your journey, my friend. Take care.